Hello, hello, and welcome to ESPN FC Live. And boy, do we have an interesting one to talk about. Match week 2 of the Premier League. And let me tell you, Shaka, when I woke up this morning at 7:30 a.m. US time to tune into this game, I did not have this on my bingo card. Manchester
Mm.
City down by Tottenham Hotspur and Thomas Frank's mighty army. 2-0 win for Spurs in this one. And it wasn't even 24 hours ago, Shaka, that yesterday I was doing FC Live with Don Hutchison. He was giving me his prediction, and he actually said to a win to Spurs. And then he said, "Oh, no, sorry. What am I thinking? City." Because nobody else saw this coming. But Spurs have managed to get it done, Shaka. Did Thomas Frank win this one based on the discipline and the structure that we expected him to bring to Spurs, or do you chalk it down to Manchester City having an off day?
Well, I guess it's maybe too easy to chalk it on to City having an off day. Much like last week, we were raving about Manchester City and that performance against albeit Wolves. But yeah, you got to give Spurs their credit here. I thought while big players of Manchester City didn't show up, and we'll get to that, I thought Spurs were again kind of showing them at their best. Romero's a very good defender when he's playing as he did today. At times he just seems to lose focus. He kind of gets caught up in other little physical battles, and that costs him. You saw the importance of Van de Ven alongside him all day today, not just for his pace and what he gives in terms of cover, but his anticipation. Again, one of the best defenders in the Premier League, Van de Ven. Now, if Spurs can just keep him fit, will be a huge bonus for them in terms of their own ambitions. And now I much prefer to focus on Spurs, kind of give them. I thought they were deserving winners in a week that it's not been an easy week for Spurs fans. Let's be honest, through
Who
no fault
knows?
of through no fault of their own, through nobody who was involved today. But then, what a way to cap the week off in going to the Etihad, winning 2-0, everybody playing their parts. Whether we're talking Richarlison, Kudus, Johnson, Vicario in goal. I've mentioned Romero and Van de Ven. I thought just from back to front, it was an outstanding performance for Spurs. Take your hat off, Thomas Frank, because I didn't think he'd get it this right this early on. And much like last week, you've got to temper all our praise and our criticism with we're only a week in, or now we're only 2 weeks into the season. This is a result that I think um, gave not just Spurs fans, but that Spurs dressing room a lot to build on.
Yeah, and I know, as you said, it's been a difficult week for Spurs, potentially losing out on the race of a man whose name has 3 letters that we'll talk about in just a bit. But I do want to talk about City first again, because it is the biggest surprise. The fact that they're at the Etihad, you saw fans pouring out of the Etihad, probably scratching their heads, especially after what was last week. And again, I remember telling our good friend
Hmm.
Manoa, who was very excited about that win, I said, but Nathan, respectfully to Wolves, this is Wolves, though. Come
It's
on,
Wolves.
to expect City to do. But he was saying that it was a statement win in the sense that they were able to blow out some of the cobwebs and the concerns that we saw from Manchester City last season, which ended up being a trophy-less season for City, where in City's world, as Erling Haaland told me, it feels like a failure. And you look at this performance now, you compare the two. What is Pep Guardiola thinking?
He's thinking, where were my big players? Where were the players who kind of stood up and were counted last week? Reinders, man of the match a week ago, non-existent today. Cherky didn't do anything that as we sit, I can recall. Marmoush had a couple of opportunities, linked up well with Erling Haaland, but again, just with the final touch, the final finish, I thought wasn't anywhere near sharp as we'd seen when he first joined Manchester City. At the back, and Stones for the opening Spurs goals, Stones slipped. That can happen. But again, I thought kind of given what you know to expect from Spurs, City playing a very high line, that's asking for a lot of trouble. In a back four that's still trying to get used to James Trafford, or maybe that I've got that the wrong way around. James Trafford still trying to figure out what his starting position is with this back four. How high up does he start? How low down? Trying to develop some kind of an understanding relationship with the back four. And in the end, they were exposed. And as I mentioned, okay, you can look at the slip from Stones, that happens to anybody, and give Spurs a credit for the opening goal. For the second, James Trafford has got to do better with that. That for me is just that comes down to coaching. Why you try to pass a ball 6 yards out, dead middle of your goal with a player under pressure is simply beyond me. At some point, somebody's just got to say, you got to kick it. You don't have to pass it within 20 yards. Sometimes you just have to go long and regroup and reset. So for me, poor decision that James Trafford will have to take the blame for. But also, I want to say to the goalkeeper coach or whoever is responsible, sometimes you got to tell your goalkeepers, just go long. We
Mm.
let Pep shout. I've been there where you make a decision that you feel that's best for the team, even though it's different from what the manager is saying, and he's going to shout from the sidelines. That's fine. Let him shout. That's you're on the pitch to make those decisions. And I thought James Trafford didn't do that. Didn't make a good decision.
Well, speaking of that, I just want to stick a pin there on the goalkeeping situation because we know that, and we have been discussing how Manchester City seem to be courting Donnarumma as well. There's a little bit of a battle between the Manchester clubs. When you're looking at this, so again, something we spoke about after the win against Wolves, that everyone was feeling confident that going forward, they probably don't need Donnarumma, considering the fact that Donnarumma doesn't necessarily fit Pep's style either.
Yeah.
Um, or doesn't necessarily possess the characteristics Pep Guardiola is going to want in your goalkeeper, which is being good with your feet. That's also the problem that he encountered at PSG under Luis Enrique. And a lot of us said that or felt that, yeah, James Trafford, he should be the one going forward. Now, after today, which somebody would probably say, this is the real deal. This is what it's like to play for Manchester City, where you're scrutinized like this. This was a proper measuring stick against Tottenham Hotspur instead of Wolves. How do you think this could influence that goalkeeper situation now?
In all honesty, I hope it doesn't. In many ways, listen, I think the one thing, and you're right, as we've been saying all along, Donnarumma is not the goalkeeper to fit Pep's style. Donnarumma is not passing the ball 6 yards simply because he's not good enough with the ball at his feet. And that's what Pep asks of his goalkeepers. So
Mm.
it doesn't make an awful lot of sense. What Donnarumma does bring, though, is experience and a presence between the sticks. And kind of given who Edison grew to be for Manchester City, dominant presence between the stakes, that's the kind of parallel you see there. But that presence only comes with experience. And Trafford, as talented as he is inexperienced. So now for me, with a week before, was it Brighton next weekend? My ask then is, if I'm a part of that Manchester City coaching staff, if I'm part of the goalkeeper coaching setup, I'm putting my arm around Trafford and I'm saying, don't worry about that. That's part and parcel. We'll take as a coaching staff, as a club, we'll take responsibility for that because that's what that's how we want our teams to play. That's how we want our goalkeepers to play.
Mm.
Again, I've been there. I've been there where um, go- coaches have said to me, Shaka, I want you to come for every single cross. And if you miss it, I'm going to take responsibility. I'm
Mm.
going to say, I told Shaq to come for that. You don't worry about it. And that gave me a confidence and a presence to come for crosses. And when I missed, no big deal because I knew exactly what was going to happen. That the coaching staff was that the manager was going to take the blame for that. I remember the conversations very well. And the conversation was, if you come for 10 crosses, you're going to catch six, two you're going to fumble, one might end up in the back of the net. If you don't come for those 10, three or four may end up in the back of the net.
Mm.
So I'm going to take the one. I'm going to take the one on the end of a mistake. I'll take the blame for that. and it gave me a confidence. Now, if as a coaching staff you say to Trafford, this is how I want you to play, because 10 times you pass the ball out to the back in that manner, it might seem risky, but three we're going to or six or seven we're going to get down the other end and get an opportunity. Two or maybe three will find its way to the back of the net. One might end up in the back of our net. I'll take that 3-1 scoreline if you
Mhm.
follow what I'm saying. So now if management can take that pressure away from James Trafford, it allows him to grow in confidence. It allows him to understand his role and to be confident in playing the ball out to the back. And with time, and kind of given what you saw outside of two or three mistakes, all right, albeit high profile mistakes during the course of this game, that presence will come for James Trafford. And that's what I'm asking of City's coaching staff here.
Well, as we know, we like to say horses for courses. And just looking at Manchester City's 11, I mean, apart from Erling Haaland, Ruben Diaz, John Stones, you would say that they are the only three most experienced ones. And actually, just reading an interesting stat, just saying that this was Manchester City's youngest Premier League starting 11 since 2010. So Pep Guardiola, of course, giving the new faces and the younger faces or the less experienced faces in a City shirt more of a baptism of fire to say, go out there, let me see what you got in these major things. So how deeply would he read into this kind of a result and performance now going forward, Shaka, given the fact that we still are so earlier on in the season?
Well, you're right. We are early on in the season. As we keep saying, this is just the second game of this season, but coming off the back of what was easily City's worst season in recent memory. I use that term fairly loosely, kind of given who City have been in the not so long ago past, but still, kind of given what we saw last season, it's reason maybe to be concerned. But that being said, I still think that this is a wonderfully talented City side. It's far better than this performance or last season would suggest. And Pep has every right to continue to show faith with some of those young players. And now we'll see as the season kind of develops how the likes of Oscar Bob and Rico Lewis continue to fare. But otherwise, you look up and down this squad. There's talent there. There are game changers there. I'm not overly panicked about City, or City shouldn't be overly panicked
Mhm.
just yet. It was a poor day. Let's not try to disguise that. It was a poor day. There's a lot that can happen still. We spoke about the game to come against Brighton next weekend, and then of course there's an international break. Let's see how much can be put right. And speaking of which, the transfer window also closes after that
Mhm.
Brighton game, before anybody lines up for another Premier League fixture. A lot can happen, and I'm kind of also thinking about the goalkeeper situation here.
All right, well, final one now on Spurs because they are the ones who won. So we're going to end with the winners
Mm,
now. But you mentioned that it's been a difficult week for them. Of course, we know in terms of their pursuit of Eberiche Eze, seems like he is going to end up at Arsenal. So still in North London, the part that he's familiar with, though. This would feel like a massive blow to Spurs, especially when they've seen it all unfold. But is there anything that they can take from today's result, today's way that they played, that will suggest that, you know what, maybe we don't need it. Maybe we're all right how we are.
yeah, I mean, first of all, you have to make that argument because there's no counter to that. You can't go around sulking about as they go into Arsenal. You've still got a full season to play. For Spurs, and I think again, kind of looking back to last season, we're only two games into this. How
Mhm.
you finished last season in winning the Europa League, um, you forget you kind of dismiss your league position as best you can. Again, I'm looking at this from a Spurs perspective, a selective memory perspective. You finished last season by winning the Europa League. You start with a win, and then you come to the Etihad of all places,
Mhm.
and win comfortably. fairly comfortably. There's a lot to be happy about. There's a lot to build on. And the truth is, while I'm very critical of City's big players not showing up, I thought Spurs, you look at them, there's just so much praise to go around. I've mentioned Romero, Van de Ven,
Mhm.
I've
Palhinha.
mentioned Paulinho, kudos coming in. I mean, Richarlison, everybody continues to contribute absolutely meaningfully. And uh, again, whatever Thomas Frank is doing, whatever Thomas Frank is selling, that dressing room is buying, and they're getting results. And this is a really, really good place to be for them.
Yeah, well, we were very excited about Spurs when Ange Postecoglou came in. They did end up winning some silverware, and I feel like we're excited about Spurs under Thomas Frank. I do love me some Thomas Frank, though. But anyways, speaking of Arsenal, they'll be playing later on against Leeds. We'll be back on ESPN FC Live after that one, so join us then.